Hey, what's going on? This is gonna be part one of the four things we talked about in the video. As far as the the reasons why um, our communities in the situation is in, but it's also because of the women, our black women. The reason why black women sometimes you find them not being married, um, and so it's a difficult conversation for me to have because it makes me uncomfortable to speak negative. You hear a lot. You turn on the TV listening to T.D. Jakes or Joel Osteen, and you hear a lot about thinking positive and thinking, or even my man E.T. Or when I'm driving to work 5 o'clock in the morning, by 6 o'clock I turn to Steve Harvey Morning Show. All you hear is to think positive thoughts, and I think that's great. But you also have to be real, and I think sometimes if you think so positive, you can you can neglect something out of that, if that makes any sense. Because you can almost live like in your own little world, which is cool, which is nice, but somebody's gonna hurt out of that process. Because everybody ain't thinking positive. And if you want everybody to think positive, cool. Well, why do we go to war then? Why? Anyways, that's a whole other subject. Um, I want to talk about specifically crime. The first thing I mentioned, I said that the reason why you don't have as many available bachelors, number one, was because of crime. And I said specifically black on black crime. Because if one person gets shot, um, well, let's do this. Raise your hand right now if you know someone who was killed by violence that you grew up with, you went to school with. Raise your hand right now. I can name some. Terrence Mahabir from Mega Evers. I was a good friend my freshman year in high school. Mike Bethune from Mega Evers. He was killed, I want to say, during my high school years. I remember he told me, he said, tell me, he said, I would have dreams about that. Um, uh, it's others, it's more. But those are two people right offhand that I could think of because, I knew them. I spent time with them, intimate time. Um, and so I miss those people, you know. And the truth of the matter is, most likely, I know in one case, um, the perpetrator was caught. In the other case, I'm not sure. But most likely, they didn't live in mixed neighborhoods. It wasn't white, Hispanics. Most of the time, it's predominantly black neighborhoods that both of these guys lived in, and they were killed by most likely someone who looked more like them. And that's just the harsh truth. Now, to be fair, every community has violence, right? White people have violence. Hispanics have violence. In fact, go to Mexico right now, and you'll see. I'm not saying you'll see. You can hear about it, okay? You go to ISIS territory. You go to Syria. You go to Iraq, Iran. Me and you, when we see them, we thinking, okay, they're well, we call them Muslim, but they're Middle Eastern. They're Palestinian. They're Syrian. They Iraqi. When we see them, we say, well, they killing their own people, but they have differences within their own community, and so you have to be fair when it comes to the circumstances of African Americans. You got to take it into context. Like any other group of people, you're gonna have issues. I don't care if all of us were together right now in one room, one house. In fact, in Africa, perfect example. Africans, Nigerians kill Nigerians. Whether you're a Muslim Nigerian, Christian Nigerian, you're always gonna have problems. As long as human beings are here on this earth, and there's two people in the room, like Jeremiah Wright said, you're gonna have three opinions. Okay. So with that being said, we have to be fair that crime and violence and violence amongst people's own communities happens everywhere. That's just not standard for African Americans. That's the first thing. But secondly, um, in our communities specifically, 19 and this just happened. This just came out. The Nixon administration there was like this guy who wrote a book years ago, back in 1996, and he interviewed someone from the President Nixon administration. And if anybody knows about the 1970s, it was a really turbulent time in history. It was right after the 60s. Martin Luther King was killed, so we were transitioning from to a new America essentially. And this is actually when the economic decline starts. But to make a long story short, they started what we call now is the war on drugs. And there's a great documentary about this, about the war on drugs. I believe it's a documentary called The House I Live In, that came out a couple of years ago, a few years ago. But it's really good and talks about this thing. But to make a long story short, they pretty much said that the war on drugs was really used to destroy black people. That was it. Now, I may not specifically quote it the right way, but that's what the essential main part of the article was about, what the story is about. And so, with that being said, it wasn't a shock to people like myself. It should really be huge news, because we heard about COINTELPRO, and if you need to know about COINTELPRO, you can go research that. We can talk about that in another video. But we've known they've been targeting African Americans for years, especially the political, black political activists, especially the radical ones who don't necessarily fit in to the context or into the system, into the mainstream. We've seen it with the Black Panthers. But that's very important to mention because, number one, you're always going to have crime within the community. But secondly, the problem is exasperated, especially in our community, because there was a specific war planned to annihilate us. And that's the war on drugs. And so what the war on drugs created was these harsh sentences. And in the 1980s, well, actually 1990s, you changed the crack to powder cocaine sentences. So pretty much if you had a piece of some cocaine, which crack is a form of cocaine, but it's cooked, you would get a higher sentence for having the same amount of crack versus somebody who may have cocaine and go to prison for a long time just because of the way that the drug was manufactured, even though it's the same drug essentially. This is why when you see you hear songs like "I'm in Love with the Cocoa," it's like, wow, you're really talking about something that has destroyed our community. But that's neither here nor there right now. So actually, you know what? I just realized something. Let me segue into that, because the third part of what I want to talk about is the culture. So our culture, right? The mainstream culture, just like American culture, but specifically our culture, sort of glorifies violence. But that's how people are in general. It doesn't have to do with skin color. We're sinful people. We're just naturally flesh. We like football. We like to see a fight. We like to see Mayweather, right? And so that's how we naturally are. But with us, our music and music to any group, any culture is very important. It speaks to what is going on in that specific society. So our music is enjoyed by many people, many whites, blacks, Indians, everywhere. In fact, I go to a boxing class, right? And I watch how the majority of boxing classes doesn't consist of rock music or pop music. It consists of hip hop music. Because that music makes you want to go fight, right? It gives you energy. But also hip hop and I hate to just pick on hip hop, but there's elements of hip hop that have other really fun songs, the twerking songs. We have so much variety in our music, but the problem is a lot of that music is very destructive, right? Or at least the popular music, the ones that the powers that be control. So when you add in, number one, that crime is going to happen anyway. Number two, the actual war on drugs. Number three, the culture. You got a problem. And when I say the culture, I mean the culture that sort of glorifies this thing. Look at all the hip hop rappers. Look at the rappers we loved growing up in the 2000s. Look at 50 Cent. G-Unit. What? We in here. What? You're getting shot 9 times. That was like a badge of honor. Like I said, in any other culture, it would be the same thing. But for us, we don't have as many options to go the positive route. At least the hip hop artists, and they know that, to make as much money financially as someone who talks about the drugs, the sex, the violence, right? The last thing I want to mention, and this is a class. People go to, and let me just say this, guys. People go to school for these things. Like, this is a PhD class. People have studies on this. They get grants for this. So what we're doing right now is a really condensed version. But the fact that you're sticking in there right now is really good. But number 4, I would say poverty. When you have poverty, you really have an issue, okay? Because when people don't have money in a capitalistic society, you're going to try to find a way to get out of poverty, to move out of that stress. So if I'm broke, you broke, this is broke, that person broke, right? I'm trying to figure out how to get past all of you to get to where I need to be. So this is where some of the violence happens. This is where gangs start. Okay. There's so much more to say to that. There's so much more to accompany with violence and why it happens, right? And, and, and what helps with poverty. I know I'm going all over the place. I'm probably going to cut it soon. But to make a long story short, poverty is something that can be very detrimental to us, to anybody's culture. Like, there's studies that shows that your brain doesn't develop as much because you, as a child, when you're in poverty, you have a sense of insecurity. In fact, I wrote about this the other day. The kids that's in Syria, right? Not in Syria, but like in these refugee camps. The fact that they're growing up in this insecurity, they're gonna be they're getting very old at a young age, but they're gonna be really trying to be successful, right? Because they want to protect their parents. It's a natural instinct, right? So with our community, and this is my own psychoanalysis. Our condition is a little bit different. We live in probably the best material conditions in the world, right? Holistically. So with us, we want to be able to prove our standing in society, right? So whether it's to get the nice car, to as we call stunt to front, or whether it's to appear as a gangster, we want that's our mode of survival. We're not worrying about a war or some bomb hitting us. We ain't worried about ISIS. So we have different set of conditions. But poverty in our community is very detrimental to our health. But it helps create crime. So let's go back over the 4 things class. All right. The first thing we mentioned was crime happens anyway, right? When you have a group of people, it just doesn't matter. There's no respect of persons. Number 2, we talked about the specifically planned war on drugs, which was used to annihilate the black community. Number 3, we talked about the culture. Specifically, we mentioned hip hop, but we can go into movies. There's so many things, like, think about it. Paid in Full, right? I love that movie. No, actually, I don't. I used to. Paid in Full. Menace to Society. Why are those movies out? Why is that Marcus Garvey movie out? Why is it not a movie about Toussaint Louverture? Why is it not a movie about Paul Robeson? There's a reason why. Number 1, consumers don't necessarily want to just buy positive things. We want to see something negative sometimes. That's part of human nature. But also, it's because there's powers that be that can control those things too. And we can go into that as well. But number 4, what I just mentioned was the fact that poverty creates all these things. What helps create it gives an environment. So we're almost at 15 minutes. I just wanted to go into that first part. And as you can see, this could be really extensive. But I hope you listen, class. Give your comments. Tell me what you think. And I'm going to become better at these videos. I'm not going to be sloppy. This is not going to work. I have some PowerPoints or something to make it where it can be really interactive. Peace.